good exercise that you can employ when reading a text of Scripture is to try to empathize and identify with various characters, various factions, various groups within the text, to try to see what they were seeing and to understand what was motivating their action. Here we have a crowd of folks, of Jewish followers, who are coming after Paul, trying to kill him. And it's very easy to let that slide into some sort of anti-Semitic reading of the text, as has been the case for much of Christian history. But try to empathize with this crowd, with all that you know about the affects of diaspora, as Willie Jennings has often pointed out in his commentary, and I've mentioned to you in previous videos. This notion of really trying to hold on to a sense of identity as a people who are occupied by an imperial force, and the threat that they sense in Paul and his message and the newness that is coming about by the Spirit, that might help you to empathize with what this crowd is going through as they turn against Paul. Willie Jennings in his commentary has this really helpful line that says, "The crowd, easily gripped by fear, cannot receive the gift. It can only see threat." And I'm reminded of our own situation as we entered into a process of cyber worship, of distancing ourselves physically, as worshiping together as a congregation, scattered about through tools like Zoom and Facebook. We, along with nearly every other congregation in the country, and how much anxiety and fear has gripped so many in the country around those changes that have oftentimes reacted quite inappropriately and with great difficulty in relation to these necessities right now, with churches even here in Massachusetts banding together to try to pressure the governor to reopen houses of worship even before the public health science indicates that it is good to do so. And I just wonder what the fear and the anxiety and the difficulty is that's rising up for so many people around this this occasion of necessity that is certainly inconvenient and not what we would imagine for ourselves, but that kind of fear that keeps folks from seeing the gifts of this time, the gifts of folks like just this past week, and you're watching this video a few weeks from the time that this happened. But when we prayed in our service for a beloved member who was in the hospital, and that afternoon that member texted me and said, "Thank you for praying for me. I was watching on Facebook." And how inconceivable that would be in most circumstances for us to be gathered, scattered all over the country and the world, praying together for a person in a hospital who is also watching us pray for them in that situation, and how powerful that is, how much of a gift that is that we couldn't see if we were so gripped by fear that we weren't able to note the gifts of the newness of this hour, gifts that we wouldn't have chosen for ourselves or even cultivated outside of the necessity of this moment, but things that have really proven to be substantive gifts of the Spirit that have drawn us together, even as we have been physically apart. Also want to help you figure out how to empathize with Paul here. Paul is continually being victimized by crowds of people, not just the Jewish followers around various cities he is visiting, but also the Roman Empire. Here we see the military stepping in and taking control of Paul's body. And this is a situation that Paul encounters again and again. And I wonder how you can empathize with Paul right now, being in an extraordinarily difficult circumstance, one that probably we can't identify with at this level, but being in a difficult circumstance and figuring out how to make the most of that circumstance. What you see here is Paul defending himself and saying, "Can I speak to the people?" And then he gets up and gives an impassioned sermon You'll hear that sermon in tomorrow's reading that you do, but he tells of his conversion, and he talks about the good news in this situation of having to defend himself, being on the brink of death almost at the hands of the crowd. And yet he uses this crisis situation as a means of sharing the good news of what is happening to him and through the Spirit in the world.